Hey everybody, we are live. I am so excited to be here. I hope that everybody had a wonderful 4th of July and safely saw fireworks. I love summer because we can get out of the house safely. It's awesome. So my name is Gabe Howard and I am the author of Mental Illness is an Asshole and Other Observations. You can get it on my website. But I only show you this to give you an idea of who I am. I live with bipolar and anxiety, and I wrote the book that you can see down there. And I became a mental health advocate because I struggled so much to find care, and I had to learn so many things literally all by myself. My family didn't understand. I didn't understand. The people around me didn't understand. And there was really a lot of trial and error. So it took me 4 years from the time I was diagnosed to the time that I reached recovery. And I define recovery as spending more of my time living my life than I do managing bipolar disorder. But once I reached recovery, I just really reflected back on the last 4 years. And I was like, man, I wish I would have known some of this stuff. I wish that my family would have known some of this stuff. I wish that people were openly talking about this. And now all these years later, I make myself available to answer your questions. The way that it works is just put your questions in the comments. Shorter questions work better because we pop them on the screen like we did here with my book link. And I will answer as many as I can. Now, full disclosure, I am not a doctor. I'm just a person who lives with bipolar disorder. I'm a certified peer supporter in the state of Ohio. And I've been around for a long, long time. And of course, I wrote the aforementioned book. So all of my answers will come from lived experience and being a subject matter expert. And I will remind you of that as I answer the question. So I can't tell you what medicine you should take, and I can't prescribe your room, or I can't diagnose your roommate or your mom or your daughter or your son, but I can give practical advice based on my experience. And that's what we're going to do for the next half hour. Now, before I pop up the first question, we want to give a huge round of applause to Camera, because without her, none of this would happen. You see all the stuff that's changing down there? Change something real quick. That's the camera. That is not the camera. That is Camera. She is awesome. She works for the Mighty, and she does super cool things and makes all of this happen. So huge round of applause to Camera. All right, Camera, are we ready for the first question? I know nobody can hear you, but I feel like you're saying yes. All right. Does bipolar come easier if you have anxiety and depression? I'm unsure if I have that. So a couple of things. Let's talk about what bipolar disorder is. Like, bipolar disorder is not a symptom; it's a collection of symptoms. So it's a little bit hard to describe it, but think of like a spectrum. And on that spectrum, you have godlike mania at the very tippy top, and you have suicidal depression at the very, very bottom. But then, of course, you have all this space in between. And living on this space could be things like anxiety, or hypersexuality, or paranoia, or in some cases, psychosis. And even in mania, at the very tippy top, we have hypomania, or trending into mania, excitability. And even on the bottom, suicidal depression, we all have slightly depressed, moving into depression, and not just suicidal depression. So one of the things to focus on when you say, if you have anxiety and depression, does bipolar disorder come easier? If you are symptomatic, moving between the symptoms along the spectrum may be easier for you. Sick is sick, right? Once you are compromised, it is more easy. It is easier to be compromised in additional ways. So keep in mind, if you are having depression or anxiety and you think you might meet the criteria for a bipolar diagnosis, that you definitely want to go get that checked out. Whether or not it's easier is really not the part that we need to focus on. What we need to focus on is if you're suffering the symptoms of depression or anxiety, or you suspect that you might be bipolar, have bipolar disorder, then you definitely want to report those symptoms to a prescriber, or to a doctor, so that you can get a good diagnosis and move along to wellness, which is where we all want to be. I hope that helped. Thank you so much for that question. I understand we have more ready, so we will just move right along. What's your top tips with dealing with depression caused by trauma. So I don't know that I have specific advice for depression that's caused by anything. I have advice for, or suggestions. Let's go with suggestions. I have some suggestions for coping with trauma, and I have some suggestions for coping with depression. And I understand that they can really be interlinked a lot more than people discuss. So let's separate those out and talk about some steps for coping with trauma. The first thing is I believe strongly that one of the things that gives trauma so much power is our reluctance to acknowledge it. And I don't just mean our reluctance to acknowledge it when we're sick or symptomatic, but I also mean our reluctance to acknowledge it when we're well. Trauma has a lot of power because it hides. The thing that caused us trauma, we often want to avoid. And I really feel that that allows that trauma to lurk in the shadows. We want to confront that trauma. And again, depending on who you are, what the trauma is, the circumstances, etc., it's important to do that in the safest way possible. Now, a lot of people confront their trauma with the help of a therapist or a psychologist or a doctor, and that is certainly a recommended way. Other people confront their trauma by doing something as simple as writing it down and then setting it on fire. Other people confront their trauma by discussing it with the person who caused them the trauma, if they can do it in a safe and reasonable and boundary set way. You have to find out what's best for you and move on. Now, as far as coping with depression, the best advice that I have is do something. So often when we're depressed, we just lay there and we do nothing and we think, well, I can't. And we start filling in the blanks of things that we can't do. I can't go to work. I can't go outside. I can't go to school. I can't call my mom. I can't go out with my friends. I can't clean the house. And those are like big things, right? And all of those things may well be true. You might not be in a position to go outside. But rather than focus on the things that you can't do, focus on something that you can do, and then break it down to its lowest common denominator. See, often we say things like, I can't take a shower. Okay, well, a shower is actually a collection of things. You have to get out of bed, you have to get undressed, you have to turn on the water, you have to get into the shower, you have to soap yourself up, you have to wash your hair, you have to then get out of the shower, you then have to dry yourself off, you then have to put your clothes back on, right? That's like 9 things. So people say, well, I don't have the energy to shower. Why not instead break it down? I'm going to stand up. That's it. That is goal number 1. I'm going to stand up. And then when you stand up, you've done it. You have met your goal. So now goal number 2 is I'm going to get undressed. So you take your clothes off. Hey, I did it. If you're advanced, you can make goal number 3, put your clothes in the hamper. And then just move through it very, very slowly and reward yourself for doing all of those steps. It makes a big difference in how we view ourselves and what we're accomplishing. And those are just 2 quick coping skills, one for trauma, one for depression, that I can recommend, fully acknowledging, of course, that your results may vary. All right, camera, next question. As someone who is actually just diagnosed, what's something that you wish you knew at the beginning? I love this question. Thank you so much, Rachel, for asking it. One of the things that I wish that I knew when I was newly diagnosed with bipolar disorder was the amount of time that it was going to take. I bought into if I am just med compliant, I will be fine. And that's all I have to do. That the pills were magical. I didn't have to do any work. I would come home with my little prescription. I would take my pills as prescribed, and voila. Life was going to be fantastic. Well, guess what? This whole idea of being med compliant sort of misses the fact that you have to be med compliant on the correct medications, right? And that misses the fact that you have to be aware of your illness, and then you have to learn coping skills, and you have to be able to get into the doctor, and you have to tell the doctor the right things, and you have the trial and error of the medicine, and all of that takes time. So when I wasn't better 6 weeks later, I thought I was a failure. I wish I had a better understanding that it would take 1, 2, 3, 4 years or 5 years or 10 years or just any number above. I have now left the hospital. I am now cured, which is what I thought. And for the first year, I honestly believed that I was just an utter failure instead of what the reality was, which is this is a delicate process. and I need to be kind to myself and understand that this is going to take baby steps to fix. But if I'm making that progress and I'm making those baby steps, I will get there. And I think that would have allowed me to be kinder to myself and gentler to myself. And it also would have stopped a lot of that, well, this isn't working, I want to quit thinking. Because looking back, it was working. It was just working differently and slower than I was led to believe by television. That is what I wish I would have known at the very, very beginning. Thank you so much, Rachel. All right, next question. What are the signs of bipolar disorder? So the basic signs, and I'm speaking 30,000 foot view. Remember, only a doctor can diagnose bipolar disorder. But the basic signs are sort of these huge mood swings between, depressed and manic. Mania in and of itself is a big indicator. If you have just mania, you could be diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Mania is described as this consequence-free, godlike feeling of you're invincible. You can literally jump off a 100-story building, fly, land on your feet, and the whole world loves you. It's so unrealistic. It's like super happy. Right? It's super happy, a flurry of activity, sleeplessness, just, I am great constantly. And then, of course, that feeling leaves. And it leaves you with something else, whether that's just a feeling of stereotypical or normal, or whether that's suicidal depression. It's that sort of a mood swingy spectrum that you need to look out for. Quick asterisk. If you suspect that you or somebody has bipolar disorder, go to a doctor. You don't need to be sure. Just go to a doctor and say, hey, I think I have bipolar disorder because, and fill in the blanks, and let the doctor tease it out. For some reason, in mental health, unless we are positive we have the illness, we don't want to talk to anybody. We don't do this in physical health. We go to the doctor all the time and say, I feel like crap. What are your symptoms? X. And then the doctor tells us what's wrong with us, gives us a treatment, and we get better. But for some reason in mental health, we want to be 100% sure that we have it before we're willing to do anything about it. Let's normalize telling a doctor, I feel badly, or I feel this way. Can you help? Do I need therapy? Do I need medication? Do I need a support group? That way we can get ahead of it before it becomes so full blown, it's easily recognizable by a layperson. So that was my public service announcement. All right. Let's go on to the next question. What are the types of bipolar disorder? So there's two major types of bipolar disorder, bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. It does subtype in there. Yep, what is the difference between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2? So bipolar 1 is suicidal depression all the way to godlike mania. It's the most mania that you can get, right? And bipolar 2 is all of that except for you stop at hypomania. So you don't quite get to the highest part of mania. It's still the mood swings and it's still hypomania, but it's not full-blown mania. There is also bipolar disorder with psychotic features. Now, that can be bipolar 1 with psychotic feature or bipolar 2 with psychotic features. And again, I don't want to get, I'm not a doctor, so I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but just understanding that if you have bipolar 1 or bipolar 2, and you also experience psychosis or delusions, you could have the psychotic features indicator. Of course, you could also have schizoaffective disorder or another illness altogether. So please, if you experience any of those symptoms, do not say that this guy on the internet told me that I had X. Just relay these to a doctor and talk to them about it. Describe your symptoms and be open to treatment and available options. And I did. I wrote the book. Thank you so much, Camera, for popping it on the screen. And please keep your questions coming. I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm super depressed and I lost my job. Any advice to get through this? Lisa, the first thing that I want to say is there's huge power in acknowledging that you're super depressed, right? And it's also, there's huge power in understanding causation. You're super depressed because you lost your job. This makes sense, and you need to give yourself, my recommendation, you do need to give yourself the right to be understandably upset by this. This is an understandable thing. If I lost my job, I would be sad, bummed, angry, whatever words you want to use as well. We are human. We're designed to experience emotions. We're designed to feel badly when bad things happen to us. So give yourself huge, huge props for two things. One, recognizing that you're super depressed, your words as you used, and two, give yourself props for feeling normal, right? It's normal. We have to understand that when we feel this way, that it's normal and that it's okay. And then as far as suggestions for moving forward, the mantra that I use more often than not is that this too will pass, and any baby step that I can make forward is progress. I am beating my depression. I am beating my symptoms. I am beating my illness by doing anything that's not it. So if all you do is get up, put on clothes, and go get the mail, you are chipping away at the depression. You are chipping away at the symptoms, and you are telling it that, hey, you haven't given up, and you are going to continue moving forward no matter how slowly it is, so that you can get past this and get on with your life. Finally, of course, do not hesitate to reach out and ask for help, whether you're just venting to a friend, whether you're talking to a buddy, or of course, whether you go to a support group, therapy, psychologist, or your psychiatrist. Please report those symptoms so that you can get the surrounding support that you need, whatever that looks like for you in your specific case. We absolutely want to, of course, normalize asking for help. If I was super sick with a high temperature, I'd call my doctor immediately. If you're super depressed and you're starting to have feelings that you can't control, or you feel like you can't get out of it by yourself, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That is perfectly acceptable and perfectly normal. Please call your doctor or healthcare professional and reach out for help. That's the smartest thing that you can do. All right, here we go. Can bipolar or other mental disorders be hereditary? Yes. In fact, it's commonly hereditary. Now, people hear commonly hereditary and they hear two things. They hear, I got a mental disorder from my mom and dad, or it runs in my family. That's not necessarily true. Or two, they hear, I will pass this on to my child. Those are the two things that people hear when I say that bipolar disorder or other mental disorders are hereditary. All of those things can be true. You may have gotten it. It may be hereditary in your family, and that's why you have, or that's the lineage, I guess, of your illness. Or you could be like me, and I'm the only one. Nobody else in my family has severe and persistent mental illness. I just popped up all special. And also, when it comes to passing it along, people hear, I will. There are all kinds of numbers on it. If your partner does not have bipolar disorder, the numbers are around 25%. If your partner does, the numbers are around 40. And again, even those numbers are changing constantly. So I bet if somebody Googles it, they'd come up with different numbers because they're constantly researching it, and those numbers are constantly changing. And I will, by admission, admit my numbers are a couple of years old, because the bottom line is you just don't know. You just don't know. There's a lot of things that are hereditary. Look, I have red hair. My biological father, he had red hair and passed it along to me. But get this, he had other children. They did not have red hair. So who knows? Who knows? There's a lot of things that are hereditary that we can't always worry about. But yes, there is a hereditary link. But please keep that in proper perspective when you consider this, when looking at other members of your family or considering your own choices in having children, because we want to make sure that you get accurate information and you're not scared away by, there's a lot of fear when it comes to an illness is hereditary. All right, next question. I have a diagnosis of bipolar 10 years ago, but I don't think it is entirely accurate in my case, and I don't really get mania, and I am not suicidal either. Can I ask a psychiatrist to be reassessed? I am not under the mental health team at the moment. I work part-time and life is generally good. Yes, yes. The best mental health care, the best health care is a partnership between patient and doctor. That it is certainly possible that you were misdiagnosed 10 years ago. It is not uncommon in mental health to be misdiagnosed for any number of reasons. It doesn't mean that a doctor was bad. It doesn't mean that you misreported your symptoms. It doesn't mean anything. This is how the science works surrounding mental illness and mental health and bipolar disorder. So yes, it is absolutely completely reasonable to ask to be reassessed and explain why you don't think this is accurate. Now, keep in mind, it is also perfectly reasonable that you were correctly diagnosed. You've just been in recovery for 10 years, and that's its own bonus as well. So as much as we want our doctors to be open to the patient experience and our reporting, we must also be open to their information, their guidance, and their professional opinion. Working together is how we get the best healthcare. So don't go in with a preconceived notion that, oh, I know I'm right. Just go in with the suspicion that you may be right, explain why, and have that good discussion, get that good monitoring, that good reporting of symptoms, and then see where you together end up. If you feel like your doctor is not working with you or your doctor is not open to working with you, then is when you want to consider getting another doctor that will work with you and make sure that you get that correct diagnosis that you do understand. But I say this to all patients. Patients like me, we always complain about doctors being stubborn, but we can be stubborn too. So remember, both sides have to keep an open mind and work together. It's very, very vital. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, next question. Can you explain brain fog, please? Brain fog is kind of one of these, it's not like a medical diagnosis, right? It's more like a feeling. It is a symptom, but I can't even think of a good way to put it. It's kind of like a stuffy head, right? When people say stuffy head, we know that we're talking about a runny nose or congestion or even a cough, but a stuffy head is not a medical diagnosis. It's more like a collection of my nose is all gunked up. Brain fog is kind of like when your brain is all gunked up. It feels different for everybody. I've heard it described in many different ways. For me, it was like I had this, I could tell that I was there and I was aware of who was in the room, but I'm not quite certain what they were doing or why. Everything was kind of moving in like this spacey slow motion like you see in the psychedelic movies in the 70s. I could hear myself talking, so I felt like I was communicating, but maybe that came out as word salad. Maybe it came out reasonable, but I couldn't catch all the words that were coming back. In many ways, it felt like being inebriated. Like if I was really drunk or coming out of, like if I just woke up from surgery and everything feels very odd when you're waking up from that anesthetic. Like I'm looking around and I kind of know where I am, but I kind of don't. It's that feeling. You've got some control and some awareness, but not all of it. And again, it feels differently for a lot of people. I've been surprised by how other people explain it. And of course, it's very good for them. Other people have described it as like grogginess, like when you first wake up in the morning. Other people are more extreme and define it as like, being high and drunk all at the same time. Again, it varies for different people. But the general gist is you have some control of your faculties, but not enough. The majority is kind of in a haze. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. All right, next question. How do you know you are hypomanic and not just having a really good phase depression-wise? After years of severe depressions, I find that really hard that I can't differentiate what is normal and what's hypomanic behavior for me. Most of the time, only looking back. Joyce, this isn't an uncommon issue. One of the things that I recommend to every single person living with bipolar disorder is it's great to have like a buddy, right? Somebody that says, hey, Gabe, you're a little off. I'm like, oh, I'm just really happy. No. You're a little more than happy. But somebody that you trust, somebody that's not going to abuse that power. Also, you talked about, I only notice when I look back. Now, if we're really honest with ourselves, a lot of times we say, I only noticed it when I looked back. Okay, maybe that's true, but did you suspect it in the middle? And I'm a firm believer that once you suspect, you're probably right. More often than not, when I've suspected that I was hypomanic or suspected that I was manic, I was. There's just, it's sort of a if you have to ask kind of thing. So there's not a lock. Hypomania has a way of twisting our brains and taking control of it. And of course, if you're somebody who's experienced depression, you don't want to believe it, right? Like, isn't this a bummer? Like, I'm depressed and I feel really, really sad. And now I'm happy and somebody's like, well, but are you sick? It's like, why can't I just be happy? It does come with experience. If you look back enough, you can start looking for, okay, what's the behavior? If I don't get a lot of sleep and I'm happy, that's for me. If I am not sleeping well and I'm really happy, mania is there. If I'm really happy but I'm sleeping normally, mania is not there. That is something that I have figured out for me. Your results may vary. I am so fortunate that I have a best friend and a spouse that both I can trust. They will not come up to me and say, Gabe, I think something's off, unless they mean it. And I can trust them. They don't use it when we get in a fight. They don't say it because I'm being annoying or loud. No, they mean it when they say it. And I can respect that and rely on it. If you can make that kind of relationship with somebody, it's extraordinarily helpful. And that comes with time. You have to educate yourself. You have to educate them. You have to educate them about what your symptoms look like. You have to give them space to make a mistake or to say the wrong thing without, throwing the baby out of the bathwater. So it's really, really hard. Thank you for asking that question. All right, we have about 4 minutes left, so we're going to do a speed round with like 3 or 4 questions. Ready? Go. There's so much work. Took me 6 years. No, that went away. I lost it. Here we go. I don't ever feel I have mania, but depression is heavy. Can bipolar disorder still be the correct diagnosis? If you've never had mania, you don't have bipolar disorder. Now, that said, remember, your understanding of mania may be different from a doctor's. A lot of people don't recognize mania in themselves because it feels so good. But if you truly, truly, truly have never been hypomanic or manic, then bipolar disorder is not the correct diagnosis. Major depression would be. Again, understanding that I am not a doctor and I am literally just giving you the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 5 criteria, and you're gonna wanna get that checked out by a doctor. All right, next question in our speed round. Someone mentioned on an Instagram post that prolonged mania and constant mania can alter our brain mapping. Is this true? Similar to PST, brain scan being different before trauma. Sincerely, I don't know. I can tell you that any prolonged damage to the brain of any symptom is gonna change us in profound ways. Whether or not that can be seen on a CT scan, I don't know, but there is a cost to this kind of trauma, this kind of illness, etc. And that's one of the reasons that we wanna get in to see somebody before it gets really, really bad, before we hit the crisis point. I do not know if it will change our brain mapping on a CT scan. I honestly don't, but it's super important to get these things checked out because why risk it? All right, speed round. Next question. Why are bipolar and borderline personality so common confused for the same disorder? I think about this a lot. I honestly believe that the answer is BPD. Borderline personality disorder is abbreviated as BPD, which a lot of people think stands for bipolar disorder. Now, bipolar is one word and disorder is the second word, so there really would never be a P in there. So BPD is borderline personality disorder, and bipolar is just bipolar. It's often just written. Borderline personality disorder is shrunk because it's so big, but people see BPD and they think it's borderline personality, and I think that makes them look at the symptoms of bipolar disorder or of borderline and think they're looking at the wrong thing, and then start mixing up those symptoms. Other than that, I don't know, but I do believe that that's a confusion point. So much that when I write about borderline personality disorder, I will not abbreviate it. I will write out borderline personality disorder every time because I don't want to risk the confusion. I really think this is one of the cases where seeing it in written form more often than word form has really led us in the wrong direction. All right, I think we have time for one more. Quite often, there are environmental factors that contribute to symptoms of bipolar disorder. For me, stress is a significant trigger. What lifestyle changes would you recommend to reduce stress? The number one lifestyle change that I would recommend is sleep hygiene. If you have a TV in your room, get it out of your room. If you use your phone in bed, stop it. If you use your bed for anything other than sleep or sex, you're doing it wrong. Sleep hygiene is the number one thing that I believe that people in our situation really miss out on. The only thing I do in my bed is sleep and sex. So when I climb into bed, it sends a message to my body that it's time to sleep. I don't. Some people crawl into bed and they're reaching for their phones, they're watching television, and this sends a message to your body when you're trying to sleep that, hey, we need to be awake because this dude might be doing other stuff. And you don't want that. I keep my room cooler. I keep a fan on, yeah, even in the winter. I have a white noise machine. I have all of these rituals so that when I climb into bed, my body's just like, yeah, we're sleeping. That's the only thing that we have to do. If you go to bed at the same time and get up at the same time, being fully rested just helps you fight stress in very, very significant ways. If I had to pick a second one, sincerely carve out some time for yourself. Even if it's 15 minutes, I get up every morning and I go to a local restaurant and I get a drink and I sit and I read Mental Floss and Mighty and Psych Central and fun stuff on my phone, things that I enjoy, just, snippets of facts while drinking my drink, and I spend about a half an hour a day doing that. Even if it's just 5 minutes a day to walk around the block, do something for yourself that brings you joy, that you can look forward to. It doesn't have to cost any money. It can be so simple. Just at least once a day, you should have something that brings you joy. Thank you so much, everybody. My name is Gabe Howard. I did write the book, Mental Illness is an Asshole and Other Observations. If you get it from right down there at gabehoward.com, I will sign it for you. It's 380 pages of awesome. I am so, so glad that you all agreed to spend some time with me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I really super appreciate it. Grab the book. I would love it. I'd sign it. I'll throw in swag.